Principles Show Daily Podcast by In40U.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something pretty fascinating today. We're looking at Iran, specifically their push for stronger rail partnerships within the SCO.
The Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
Right, the SCO. Sometimes it feels like it's kind of flying under the radar, but it's huge.
Oh, absolutely. It's becoming a major player, especially when you look at global trade, and politics, and rail networks. They're right at the center of it all.
Yeah, you don't always think about it, but those steel lines, they were practically redrawing the map. Could even shake things up geopolitically.
Globalization isn't all ships and planes anymore.
It's like trains are making a comeback.
Especially in Eurasia.
Exactly. And that brings us right back to Iran. They're really stepping up their game, calling themselves the bridge between East and West Asia. Is there truth to that?
Well, geographically, they're not wrong. Look at a map. Iran, it's right at the crossroads. Historical trade routes, natural transit hub. And the SCO, especially with China and that whole Belt and Road thing going on, they're definitely taking notice.
Okay, so location, location, location.
Right.
But it can't just be about geography.
Right.
What's Iran hoping to gain economically from this whole bridge idea?
They're casting a pretty wide net. We're talking energy, think oil and gas pipelines, but also manufactured goods, minerals, even agriculture. They basically want to be the central hub for moving stuff between Asia and Europe, and even further.
Faster trade routes. Got it. Sounds good in theory, but how are they going to pull it off?
It's complicated, no doubt. The one concrete thing they're doing is pushing for this trilateral meeting with Russia and Azerbaijan.
Sounds a bit bureaucratic.
Yeah, but trust me, this meeting is key. They're trying to standardize tariffs, streamline customs, get rid of all those bureaucratic headaches that slow trade down between those countries.
So less friction, more flow?
Exactly. Make it easier, cheaper for goods to move. And that could have some pretty big benefits, not just for Iran, but for everyone on those trade routes.
Faster shipping, lower costs, maybe even lower prices for us down the line.
That's the potential, yeah. But there's also the geopolitical side of things. More connectivity like this could really shift the balance of power, even challenge some of those old trade routes, like the ones that depend on ships.
It's like the Silk Road is getting a makeover. Trains instead of camels. And speaking of big projects, there's that north-south intercontinental corridor, right?
Ah, yes. The one that goes all the way from China to Europe, right through Iran. That's a perfect example of how Iran's trying to cement its place in this new Silk Road.
That's a massive undertaking. How big are we talking, and what kind of impact could it have?
It's huge.
Yeah.
Like 7,200 kilometers of rail lines. Think about it. Right now, shipping stuff from Mumbai to Moscow by sea, it can take over a month. This corridor could cut that down to like 2 weeks.
2 weeks versus a month? Wow.
It's a game changer for businesses and supply chains.
No wonder people are paying attention. But it's not just about speed, is it?
No, it's about cost, too. Rail is usually cheaper than shipping by sea, especially these days with fuel prices going crazy. And hey, let's not forget the environment. Trains are way more energy efficient than those giant cargo ships.
So win-win for the economy and the planet.
Potentially, yeah. But of course, there are challenges too. Building something like that takes massive investment. And then there's the geopolitical stuff. It could strengthen ties between certain countries like Russia, China, and Iran. But it could also put pressure on other nations who depend on those traditional sea routes.
It's like a high-stakes game of risk, played out with railroads, and Iran is making some strategic moves.
Absolutely. They're laying down tracks, literally and figuratively, trying to become this central player in the whole Eurasian trade network. They're expanding their own rail lines, modernizing everything, even talking with Russia about building this key rail link to finish a big chunk of that north-south corridor.
They're all in, but what's the driving force here?
It's a mix. They want to boost their economy, sure. But it's also about global influence.
Yeah.
They want to position themselves as this essential partner, this bridge idea. It's about becoming a power broker, someone you can't ignore on the world stage.
Bold strategy, but nothing's ever easy, right? I mean, what are some of the roadblocks Iran might hit with all this?
Oh yeah, there are definitely bumps in the road. One of the big ones is just the sheer amount of money they need. These projects, super expensive. And Iran's got economic constraints, especially with those sanctions still going on. Getting the funds, attracting investors, that's going to be crucial.
Right. And even if the money's there, what about the politics? I mean, both inside Iran and in the whole region. Could that derail things?
Absolutely. That's a huge factor.
Yeah.
Political instability throws a wrench in everything. Investors get spooked, construction gets delayed, even the rail lines themselves could be at risk. Iran's going to have to walk a tightrope there, make sure these projects can actually survive long term.
Yeah, like building a house on shaky ground, you need a good foundation. And speaking of shaky ground, there's the whole potential for conflict in the region. Could all this rail stuff actually make things worse?
It's kind of a double-edged sword, you know?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you've got these lines potentially boosting cooperation, making everyone more dependent on each other. That could ease tensions. But then on the other hand, it could be seen as a way for countries like Iran to gain more power, project their influence. And that could make those existing conflicts even hotter.
So a bridge to peace or a path to more conflict?
Yeah, it really comes down to how these networks are used and what the countries involved are actually aiming for. Open dialogue, being transparent, actually wanting to cooperate, that's huge if this is going to bring more stability, not less.
Right, right. And what about the countries who might feel threatened by all this? I mean, the ones who depend on shipping, what happens to them if trade routes shift?
Oh, absolutely. Countries that have always had control over those key sea lanes, they might see this as a threat to their power. They could react in different ways, maybe their own infrastructure projects, new trade agreements, even political maneuvering. It's like this big geopolitical chess game. And these rail lines are just one piece.
It's wild to see how this is playing out. You think about maps, you think they're static, but they're changing all the time, especially with how globalized everything is. And it's like these rail networks are the ink redrawing the lines.
Yeah, and it's not just physical maps, it's the economic and political landscape too. These lines could connect people, cultures, ideas in totally new ways. It can impact everything from trade to tourism to diplomacy. It's huge.
We've talked a lot about Iran's goals, the potential ups and downs, but what about the SCO? They're not as well known as, say, NATO, but they seem to be a big driver behind a lot of this.
You're right, the SCO often gets overlooked. But you think about their members, China, Russia, India, Pakistan. That's a massive chunk of the world's population and economy right there. They're becoming a force to be reckoned with. And this focus on connectivity, on projects like these rail networks, that's a clear sign of their growing clout.
So it's bigger than just Iran. It's part of this whole trend of Eurasian integration, and the SDO is leading the charge.
Exactly. They're the ones making cooperation happen. They give everyone a platform to talk. They even help finance some of these projects. It's like they're building this network, this web of interconnected economies and transportation, and it could really shift the global balance of power. I mean, decades down the line, who knows what it will look like?
It's like watching a new world order being built, and it's happening right in front of us. But we don't always see it because it's on tracks, not on the front page.
It's pretty remarkable when you think about it. And it's not just about economics and politics, Think about the cultural exchange, people connecting in new ways. Imagine taking a train from Beijing to Berlin, seeing all those different cultures, the landscapes. These rail networks could open up a whole new world of possibilities.
It's almost like a modern version of those old grand train journeys,
Yeah, exactly. And who knows what kind of new ideas and partnerships will come out of all this. It's an exciting time to be watching this all happen.
But there's always uncertainty when things shift like this. We've talked about the potential, the good and the bad, all the political maneuvering. But what does it all mean for everyday people? How could this change our lives in the years to come?
Yeah, it's hard to wrap your head around how far those ripples could go.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about like global trade changing, maybe even the way we travel and experience the world. Oh, absolutely. Even on a day-to-day level, we might see different stuff in stores, More products from Asia, maybe cheaper, or faster shipping for things we buy online. And who knows, as these rail lines grow, we might even see more people traveling by train, not just cargo.
Imagine hopping on a train in London and a few days later, you're in Seoul, crossing continents, seeing all those cultures.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of travel, More about connection, taking things slower.
It's a totally different way of looking at things. And it's not just physical travel either. Those rail lines, they could help information and ideas travel faster too. New partnerships popping up in science, tech, even the arts. We might see cultures blend more, knowledge being shared in ways it couldn't before.
Like breaking down walls, right? Opening up new ways to communicate and understand each other. But I guess anytime there's a big change, people get worried. I mean, what about jobs? If trade routes shift, could people lose their jobs? And what about the environmental impact building all this stuff?
Those are definitely important concerns. It's something we need to think about from the start. Governments, businesses, they need to invest in retraining, Make sure people can adapt as the economy changes. And for the environment, Well, we got to make sustainability a priority, right?
Hmm.
Keep that ecological footprint as small as possible.
So it's more than just laying down tracks. It's about building a future that works for everyone and doesn't wreck the planet.
Exactly. It's about seeing how everything connects and finding solutions that are good for people and the planet.
It feels like we're at this turning point, you know? Big changes, big opportunities. But we got to be smart about it.
We need to think big, be strategic, and work together. And we got to be ready to handle the complexity of it all. This world, it's all connected.
So as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with this image, okay? Imagine you're at a train station, watching a train pull away. You don't know where it's going, but it's full of possibilities. What does that make you feel?
Excited, like what's going to happen next? Or maybe a little nervous, you know? Because it's the unknown.
Whatever you're feeling, remember this. The future isn't just something that happens to us. We make it. With the choices we make, the things we do, and how we interact with the world.
Stay informed, stay curious, and stay involved. This journey, it's not over. And those tracks, they're leading us to a future that's still being written.
And that's a wrap for our deep dive into Iran's rail ambitions and the SCO. Hope you found it as interesting as we did.
Until next time, keep exploring.